Hey friends! So I'm going to try not to ramble today, but I tend to do that sometimes when I get excited. Last night at our small group, it was just a powerful time. I feel like Jesus' presence was there, and I so enjoyed the lesson, and I wanted to share some of the things that I learned from it with all of you. And I'm sure I'm not going to do nearly the justice to it that Pastor Jeff did, but I'll do my best to relay some of the important points and things that I took away from it that hopefully you too will find encouraging and thought-provoking for your own life. It's we read out of the passage in Luke chapter 24 about on the road to Emmaus. And this is where happening on the day of Jesus' resurrection. So that's important to know the timing of when this happens. And I'll read this. I'm going to start in Luke 24, verse 13. Now that same day, the resurrection day, that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. Kind of paused to wonder why they would have been kept from recognizing Jesus at that time. Let's move on. We'll come back to that. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem, and do you not know the things that have happened there in these days?" They're wondering where in the world has this person been that they don't know all these amazing things that had just happened, and that Jesus had died, that the veil had been split in two, that there was an earthquake, that the sky had gone dark, all these amazing things. And they're like, how do you not know this? But he says, "What things?" he asked. About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one that was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see. But him they did not see." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all of Scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if they were going farther. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day's almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the Scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. All right, that was the whole overview of the passage, but I want to break it down a little bit. First, starting out with the part where Jesus is walking with them and they don't recognize him. These are people who had been with him day in and day out for years, and for some reason they don't even recognize him as they're walking down. They were kept from recognizing him. And that was one point that was made last night that I just thought was really neat, is that sometimes we don't recognize when Christ is right with us. And and we feel like he's hiding himself from us. But when you think about hiding something, consider Easter time and when you hide eggs for your kids. Are you hiding those eggs from the kids, or are you hiding them for your kids? And there's sometimes that Jesus hides himself for us. He doesn't hide himself from us, but for us, because he knows that there's a greater revelation coming when you realize who he is and how his presence has been there all along. And so just consider that sometimes when you feel as if God is hiding himself from you. Then later on, let me find the passage. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" He knew what they were discussing, but he wanted to hear from them what it is that they knew about Jesus, and hear in their own words as they say from their own hearts the events that had happened and kind of verbally process that. And a lot of times that's what Christ wants from us. He wants us to verbally process events that have happened or things that he's taught us in order to really have a clear picture of what's going on. And so then they asked, "Where have you been? Don't you know what's going on?" And he says, "Well, what things?" And gives them further time to explain about what they knew about himself. And then then Jesus starts to tell them everything he knows about himself, but not from a New Testament perspective, but starting with the prophets. So it says that, "And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself." So he took the scriptures that they knew as Jewish men way back about Moses and all the prophets, and he took them to each passage that prophesied about who Jesus is and what he had come to do. And so in that portion, Jesus shows us how important it is to know the prophecies that have been made previously so that we can recognize who Jesus is now. They had read these prophecies, but they had not read them with an understanding of their relation to Christ, to Jesus Christ. And now when Jesus is explaining this to them, they're going, "Oh my goodness, this makes so much sense." They had no idea what they had already known in the past. So anyways, so Jesus explains this to them. And then, this was a really neat part. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day's almost over." So he went in to stay with them. Okay, so Jesus is here, and he doesn't need a place to stay. He didn't need to go farther. What he wanted to do was give them the opportunity to invite him in for more. Jesus wants us to press into him for more of himself. He is ready to reveal to us who he is and who we are in him. But he wants us to ask. He wants us to ask for more of him. So along with that, there was a quote that Pastor Jeff had said. The power of seeking God is often more powerful than finding him. That Jesus wants us to seek him, and there's power in the search. And here Jesus lays it out and gives them the opportunity to ask for more of him. So I just was personally thinking, when was the last time I personally asked for more of Jesus? Just really, really asked for more of him, because he wants to give himself to me and to you as well. But he wants you to ask first, and he's willing. And then he came and broke bread with them, and then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and then he disappears. Seriously. Okay, I would have wanted to hang with him a bit longer, have a little bit more discussion, but that was it. Jesus just poof, disappears. And causes me to wonder, why would he just disappear at that moment? But I think what it is his point was made clear already. They recognized who he was. They knew he had risen from the dead, and that was the message that they needed to hear. They needed to know he was risen, and that he's alive, and that God is working around them. And then what do they do after that? Verse 33, they got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. Okay, pause and question here. Why weren't they still in Jerusalem anyways? This was still the day that Jesus had been crucified. And these two of these men were just walking away from Jerusalem, trying to get a little me time. They decided, we've had a heck of a week. This has been really rough, and we just need to get away from it all and escape. And how often do we do that when we experience a rough patch and things do not go the way we had planned? In fact, in here it says that let's see. Oh, in verse 21, but we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. Notice that, we had hoped. They were hoping that he was going to be the one to ride in on that white horse and save everything, become king. He was going to rule as the great ruler forever, and they were going to be kind of sidekicks, in this whole process, and they were literally crushed. Their ideas of how Jesus was going to rule this earth were very different from God's actual plan, and they were crushed. They just wanted to get away, but Jesus stops them on their way out and reveals himself to them. And then what is the first response? They go back to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those who assembled with them together, and saying, "It's true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on that way, and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. The true news, the important news, is that Jesus is risen, and that we need to go and tell that news. That's the important part. And we can't go get away by ourselves for our own little me time when things get rough. Yeah, there is time to get away with God alone, and that is very, very important. But this wasn't the time for that. This was the time to proclaim Christ is risen. And they were trying to walk away from the body. But what they needed to do was be right in the middle of the body of Christ and proclaim who he is. And just for me, I know that most of you know that I'm walking a journey right now with cancer and a diagnosis from doctors that says I only have a few months left to live. But that does not mean I go and sit in my own little hole and wallow in what disappointments might be of what I thought my life would look like. What it means is that I press into the body of Christ and try and proclaim the truth of the kingdom to whoever will listen, because that's the greatest news ever. The message of salvation is the greatest message ever, and it lights your path. It gives you purpose, and it is our purpose here on earth because it's our path to God.